Right. Thank you very much to my previous two colleagues. Melikaya and myself will be taking you through the idea of community participation, but that is linked to joint planning and how does this work on the idea of cohesion and what does that actually mean. Within the VPUU, a key one of our design focuses is the upgrade of the public domain. So the public domain is where most of our sort of crimes that happen, and in terms of walking along streets or anything to do with outside of the private house or what goes on behind the door, so to say. So it's a key aspect of upgrading these public spaces. It's a focal point in the community, or could be a focal point in the community. A lot of our spaces in South Africa are not these kind of points. And they act as main civic places within the future spatial planning of settlements, or how do we upgrade leftover space into positive space. We also see that children and youth act as catalysts for these spaces. And it's how do we make them sort of platforms where we can have creative, interactive engagement, not only spaces just with a playground. So they actually form as venues for many forms, points of discussion or gathering or even hanging out, but positive hanging out, not negative hanging out. So we've been working in informal settlements. The one informal settlement, as Chris has stated, was Monambisi Park in Khayelitsha, where we looked at a concept of public space, which through community engagement became known as Mtonjeni. So just to give you kind of the background of what is Mtonjeni, it's a small public space. So we in terms of the public spaces, and Mtonjeni in particular, we look at safety principles and being surveillance and visibility, owned spaces, defined access and movement, image and aesthetics, which is normally something that is seen to be in the higher end kind of way of how people look at design, but it's so important in areas where there's little respect for buildings. Physical barriers, how do we create, how do we define space in these areas which have so much, so many difficulties. And then crucial, the maintenance and management. So some of the aspects, around how do the community take ownership? How do children play in the space? How do they define the space? How do we create spaces where you can have eyes on the street? Physical barriers. The houses become the physical barriers, but it's also about where are the openings of the doors, and where are the children playing, and where does the mother stand, and different aspects around that. Now, what I'm going to briefly take you through is what we consider an Mtonjeni roadmap, which is the VPUU methodology, but it's just in how we've addressed it on a very sort of small scale. So the small catalyst being the public space. So we have the idea that we start off again with a social compacting, which we consider the contract with the community. So starting from the bottom up, we go through to the planning and design. We go through to implementation, operation and management, activation and safety, and monitoring and evaluation. There are specific role players within each, and whether that's within our work stream or whether that's stakeholders or whether that's outsiders, we see it as crucial parts where these people come into play. And what I wanted to try and explain is that each section has sort of very specifics around what it is, even though everybody gets involved at every stage. There has to be a lead player at each point. What you can see in all those lead players is that either the neighbors or the leadership are fundamental to each and every step of that. However, on the ground, we know in reality this doesn't happen, and that the arrows almost counteract themselves. So planning and design has to work with how are we going to activate the space. If we define sort of space through a toolkit or element of design, what does it actually mean? How do the children play in it? So, or the management of it, if it's going to be managed by the community, it needs to be fundamental to the community contract. Or as we implement, we need to take photographs to see if change is happening and how it's changing. So monitoring and evaluation is very much linked to implementation. So we kind of turn it on its head a bit. And what is very fundamental for us is that almost the community contract becomes central to the development of these public spaces. But these are also very much linked to what we consider a spatial reconfiguration plan, so a framework plan. Not a final plan, a framework plan to give guidance. And what is crucial from the beginning, a community action plan at a bigger area-based level. So it's how the area-based level then comes down to a very small scale level. But I think fundamental to the community contract is how we go through a process. And this is where I'm going to hand over to Melikaya, and then I'm going to come back afterwards.
Good morning. Mine is to give voice to the process that we have to go through working with the local leadership, because if you look at this slide, how do we go about to get to the community contract itself? Michael talked at the beginning about one of the stages that we have to follow, which is the first one is social compact, which is the most critical stage in our methodology, because if we don't have the community involved at that level, we don't have a buy-in from the community, then it becomes difficult to do anything at the community level. So for this particular example, what we're talking about here, the Mthonjeni, so what will have happened is that we will have done a community action plan. A community action plan is a strategy at a local level where the community themselves they decide, they come up with the various interventions that they think are important for their particular community. So we won't have come up as VPUU with an Mthonjeni, but from a broad strategy in Monwabisi Park, the leadership there will have said this is what we are looking at. So and ECD strategy was one of those that they felt it was important, right, at a stakeholder level. And then going through when you now try to implement, activate the community action plan, one of the things that the special reconfiguration plan workshop that Katie was referring to, at that level, then there were discussions there as well. So how do we actually break down and actually this ECD support actually do it? And Mthonjeni then at that particular workshop was identified as something that we can actually activate some of those water points in Monwabisi Park. But what is important is that there are a number of stakeholders that you have to engage with to get to a community contract level. Chris was talking about that we are not duplicating the ECDs in the area. So it is then important that you work with the ECD forum that represent the various ECDs in that particular area, so that you can get a buy-in from them, so that they can understand that they are not able to reach all of the kids that were identified at the beginning. But the ECD forum as well works within a broad context of larger stakeholders who have various interests in the community. And sometimes we come to understand that the leadership are responsible for the voice of the broader community of Monwabisi Park. So they have to go back and say, this is what is important, this is what we are going to do, these are the Mthonjenis, right? But we know as well that the community at large, they are more interested perhaps in the housing. That's what they like. We want houses, we don't want this small project, we do social programs. For them, they don't see them as necessarily all the time as important, but they are critical, right? So you have to work with the leadership to get them to understand that first. Then they are able, at their other meetings, to able to send the message across, right? But then, after you've gone at the broad level of the broader leadership, let's say now we go to the water taps that were shown by Chris, where you've got M section, A section, because Monwabisi Park is divided in various sections. So at the broad level, all the stakeholders agree that we must have the Mthonjenis at these particular areas. But then you then have to engage as well at a section level, because within that particular section, you may have to decide where exactly this is going to make sense, which communities, which people actually is going to impact. And so then there are meetings at the section level with the particular stakeholders. And then further on to that, at the once you finish at the section level, there are people that live in and around the particular tap where the actual Mtonjeni is going to take place. So you have to engage with those neighbors as well, because that not necessarily mean that just because they are agreed at the stakeholder level, at the section level, the people that are close to it are necessarily going to want that. And in fact, sometimes they've stopped the construction of Mtonjeni, or they delayed the process. So community participation has to be active in working with those people close by, because for them maybe an issue of noise, or they're seeing a lot of people moving around, they don't know what is happening. So you need to get to engage with those people closer. And so once you get a buy-in with those people, this is where your community contact kicks in, because they are the people that become the eyes and ears on the ground, the safety of the particular area, right? The cleanliness of that. So you have to get to that level. But also as well, part of the engagement that I didn't mention is that line department, because ultimately it falls within a particular line department. So there will have been, I think there's a picture somewhere, but there will have been engagements with line departments to say, because they need to maintain as well the particular Mtonjeni. Within our work streams, all of us obviously are here. We also have to work together. I work very closely with Katie, because what happens if, let's say, the construction is stopped, then we have to be able to work with the leadership to assist in coming back and activating that space again, so that we can continue. So there's always an ongoing process of involving the communities so that they understand, they own the process, so that we don't come in and say these are the activities that are going to happen, but they are the ones that say these are the activities that we think are important, and then they can own the community action plan. Okay. I think I'm going to switch. Back to
So just to give a kind of an example, as Melikaya was talking about, a forum with different line departments, ECD forum, neighbors, different work streams in a workshop, then engagement with academic institutions in further workshops. And then we also hold area-based meetings with internal staff and the leadership as well. Site visits with our partners and trying to really understand the conditions on the ground. Again, with line departments, environmental health, water and sanitation, city parks, all part and parcel of what the future development of public space in a city is about. And then finally reaching some form of a community contract with a very immediate local community in what it's trying to say, that it's trying to strive for a safe, clean and healthy environment where our children can play. So we would like to give you an example of the one area in Monwabisi Park. When we refer to the Mtonjenis, we refer to them as the tap numbers because that's how the community, so we've renumbered the taps over the last 3 years, and so the tap numbers then have an association, and then it's a process to get to a point where the community feel like they own them and they can name the spaces themselves. So M15 is our first example. So the whole idea of the social engagement and discussing with the community what is it about this tap that is so crucial and so fundamental to a community, where everybody, all the neighbors go to, and they have to go to. It's a necessary area. So this area was covered with electrical wires hanging down and old cars, but crucial to it was a spaza shop right by it, and a lot of women doing their washing and a lot of children playing. So then we go through sort of a planning and design stage with the neighbours in the community and the leadership, in creating a toolkit. So we have a toolkit for the public spaces, but then of course it's very contextual. So I think we were talking about earlier, you may be able to have the guiding principles, but when it actually comes down to context, and even in a public space, it's very different in each one. So designing around it, but very much in situ, so upgrading in situ. Even the car remains where they always park it, sort of scenario. Then implement through very basic and simple tools of defining space so creating the public space that has a long-term gain to it, looking how the children use space, the height of the benches are at a child level, but the tables are at a height that the women wash and those kind of aspects. Then actually activating the area through an ECD, the outreach program, and then also crucial to it is the maintenance of it, which was carried out by a small team, but now that the broom, we had sort of a ceremonial handover to the spaza shop of the broom, and now the spaza shop own the broom, or they maintain the space with the broom. And what is also quite key, I'll just go back, is the spaza shop, which used to function on the right-hand side. They've now changed the spaza shop out the window on the left-hand side because they get a better view of the street. And so it's kick-starting activities around, so creating that framework again for activities to happen around there. So again, that's to try and show how the methodology can tie in to what it is.
Is that a tree that's going to provide shade in the previous slides?
Yes. We've had a big debate about what these, are they public open spaces or are they public spaces? What is shelter? We're desperately in need of shelter. But this is a long-term view. Trees are very difficult in the area, but it's also about the idea of nurturing and the children taking respect and the neighbours' respect to grow a tree. City parks are assisting us with the trees, and so it's not only is it work stream integration, it's interdepartmental. But yes, there are many challenges too, and it takes a long time to get to this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Musical chairs. I would like to talk about the third element, about the protection, in particular one about the management of spaces and operation and maintenance. This is we're jumping a little bit between the two areas of Harare and Moabisi Park, as you've realized. This is the neighborhood of Harare, and you can see in the orange color the areas that were under operation and maintenance when we started in 2006 in the area. And it's pretty much isolated around some public buildings, interestingly enough around provincial government, particularly around schools, not so much around city buildings. This is then the area under operation and maintenance as we speak as part of the program, and that's around the safety corridors, the safe pedestrian walkways, those active boxes that I've spoken about a little bit at the opening slides, and the maintenance around that. So well-maintained spaces that give you that perception of safety. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to have an urban management model underlying our overall implementation plan that includes people to occupy the public realm, and I think the Mthenjeni is a good example of that. And then to develop it into a negotiated sustainable urban management and safety model. And I would like to talk about that safety model on an area basis as well. As you can see, we're having a methodology that's applied in space in a particular urban neighborhood. Part of the development is the urban design strategy. In the informal settlements, we call it the spatial reconfiguration plan. In the formal areas, it's called development framework. And you can see that's along the major desire line, pedestrian desire line, from the neighborhoods towards, on the left-hand side, towards the train station or the CBD, as you can see. Along that, you will see a couple of buildings in gray and a couple of open spaces primarily in green. So it's a mixture of public open space and recreational spaces and built-up spaces. So two things, the urban management. and the safety plan model. So the urban management is about to have facilities, develop facilities that over the long run pay for themselves, and also to generate on an area basis a small return on investment for the area. So you have income generating facilities, and facilities like the recreational areas, like a sports field, which will never be able to sustain itself. We feel good managed spaces increase the safety in the area. So there's also a cross-subsidization within the area. So you've got a couple of partners, some of you are sitting here in the room, that are NGO partners or bigger tenants that cross-subsidize public good facilities. Public sector will not be able, or it's very difficult to get those ongoing maintenance budgets, and it's one of those issues of urban decay that we're struggling with, particularly in low-income areas. It's also trying to show to and work with the government around the developmental local government, as it's seen in the Constitution, and link it to community delivery of services through expanded public works, through other means. Chris spoke about the volunteer model, volunteerism, and then the benefits to the community. So basically through operation maintenance bring jobs, ownership, and reinvestment into an area. Safety plan model looks at an area again, and one would say if it was the private sector would have done that a couple of years ago. In the public sector, it's extremely difficult because we got different line departments, and believe it or not, each line department does their own risk assessment, does their own security, and so forth and so forth. Sometimes you got duplications, often you got voids as well, or gray areas. So we have had a partnership, developed a partnership with various city line departments, and they did the professional risk assessment across the whole area on a neighborhood level.